Okay, gonna be super excited to talk Dynasty. I wish I could make a Dynasty video every single day. Y'all know it's my true passion, but we are gonna have to slow down just slightly as we approach the season. But once we get major news during the year, you better believe that you're gonna get constant Dynasty fantasy football updates. So if you want more Dynasty videos, if you want us to make these every day like we used to, make sure you go down there, drop a like on this video, and let me know in the comment section. And of course, if you play Dynasty Fantasy Football, make sure you're subscribed to this channel. But in this video, I'm going to talk about some trade targets at the wide receiver position. A lot of these guys, according to Keep Trade Cut, have had their values dramatically decrease over the past few months. And in my opinion, there's no reason for it. But before we get to the names, I got to let you know this video is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. If you have not signed up for Underdog Fantasy yet, make sure you fix your life. Y'all know we are doing a real money fantasy football drafts every single day on Underdog. So if you want to get into draft, go to the link in the live chat, the link in the description of the video, the link in the comment section. Use promo code FLOCK when you sign up, and they will match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to 100. You'll get our 2022 fantasy football draft guide and our 2022 rankings. But let's go right into this, and let's lead it off with the easiest, and I repeat, easiest trade target at the wide receiver position in Dynasty, Jerry Jeudy. Now, I've been talking about trading for Jerry Jeudy in Dynasty for months now. I mean, this has been one of our staples. I don't even love his redraft value. Like, if we're looking at redraft expectations over there on Underdog, Jerry Jeudy is currently going as the wide receiver 22. I mean, he's going right in front of someone like Deontay Johnson. Like, yeah, I probably prefer Deontay Johnson in redraft. But from a Dynasty perspective, hell, his Keep Trade Cut price is down there at wide receiver 28. This is after the Tim Patrick injury. Like, if we go through, if we look at this graph, you had Jerry Jeudy spiking up to being the wide receiver 16 at one point post Russell Wilson trade on Keep Trade Cut. He's fallen 12 picks, in my opinion, for no reason whatsoever. This is a wide receiver that you would imagine that his Dynasty value would be higher than his redraft value. No, because, hell, Jerry Jeudy is currently younger than Najee Harris. Jerry Jeudy is currently younger than Jalen Waddle. Jerry Jeudy is currently younger than Kenny Pickett, a rookie in this year's NFL draft. Like, he is going to continue to improve. He is going to continue to develop. I currently, in my personal Dynasty Fantasy Football rankings, have Jerry Jeudy at wide receiver 18. I have him in the same tier as Garrett Wilson, Chris Godwin, Michael Pittman. We'll be talking about another one of those players later on in this video. But with Jeudy, my thought process here is that we know that this Denver Broncos offense, based on the efficiency of Russell Wilson, based on how current experts are projecting the pace of play and the passing rate over expectation for this offense, combined with that Wilson efficiency, we can assume that this will be an elite level passing offense this upcoming season. And I was a little reluctant to buy into Jerry Jeudy, very reluctant to buy into Courtland Sutton before the Tim Patrick injury. But Tim Patrick leaving this offense now changes the entire equation. Because if we're going to look at Tim Patrick's statistics over the past 2 years, Patrick has led the Denver Broncos in receiving touchdowns over the past 2 years with 11. And keep in mind, there were not many passing touchdowns to go around in Denver. You had almost 1,500 receiving yards for Tim Patrick over the past 2 years. And this is in the context of one of the worst passing offenses in the entire NFL. So if you were going to make an argument against a Courtland Sutton, against a Jerry Jeudy, it would be centered around the talent of Tim Patrick, the talent of KJ Hamler, the talent of Albert O, and these running backs, that this offense was going to be so dispersed that it would be similar to Dallas last year, where, yeah, Dallas was number one in the NFL in points scored, but it's not like CeeDee Lamb. It's not like Amari Cooper were pure league winners, because you had Amari getting his slice, Lamb getting his slice, Zeke getting his, Pollard getting his, Dalton Schultz getting his, Gallup getting his, and then when Gallup was injured, obviously you had Cedric Wilson getting his. I mean, you had everybody at the table taking a slice of that pie. Well, with Jerry Jeudy in Denver now, we don't have to necessarily have that issue with the departure of Tim Patrick. Patrick no longer at the table. And with Jerry Jeudy, he should be the wide receiver 1 in Denver this upcoming season. I know not many people are projecting this, but we've talked about it all offseason. I'm going to be very brief. Let me go pull up my draft guide so I can get the numbers exact for you. But if we're going to be looking at Jerry Jeudy versus Courtland Sutton in games that they played together. I mean, we've talked about this all offseason. 46 receiving yards per game for Jerry Jeudy. 23 receiving yards per game for Courtland Sutton. If we look at the yards per route run, Jerry Jeudy also at the very top of this offense. Jerry Jeudy, yards per route run. This isn't even taking into account that Jerry Jeudy had to play with Sutton every single game last year, and Courtland Sutton had some games without Jerry Jeudy. 1.9 yards per route run for Jerry Jeudy at 22 years old, and 1.5 yards per route run for Courtland Sutton, almost 4 years older than Jerry Jeudy. So across the board, if you're looking at the natural progression of Jerry Jeudy, I think that he is going to develop to be a much better wide receiver than Courtland Sutton. They don't win in the same right. Obviously, Sutton wins to the catch point. Jerry Jeudy wins with separation. Hell, I mean, I probably would prefer the wide receiver that can separate in today's NFL, but regardless, he's going to continue to develop. He's already been the wide receiver one in a very, very bad offense, playing alongside Courtland Sutton over the past 2 years. So now that we have an elite level quarterback, Jerry Jeudy's a no-brainer buy. Like, it's obnoxious that Jerry Jeudy costs more in redraft than he does in Dynasty. Significantly more. And he's a player younger than Kenny Pickett. Go buy Jerry Jeudy in Dynasty. And now going over to our next option, Thomas. I know we've talked about this a couple times over the past month, but please throw up the Treylon Burks value chart according to Keep Trade Cut. You were looking at Treylon Burks as a wide receiver that, oh my God, was at one point this offseason valued as the wide receiver 16 before the NFL draft. Then after the NFL draft, you had Treylon Burks getting up as high as the wide receiver 14. He was being drafted as a low-end wide receiver 1 in Dynasty, high-end wide receiver 2. And now, based on some reports about asthma, based on training camp nonsense, you have Treylon Burks being drafted as a wide receiver 3. You have Treylon Burks being drafted outside the top 24 options. And if we go through and look at this profile for Treylon Burks, he checks essentially every single box that we look at. This is a wide receiver that broke out at an early age. He broke out as a true sophomore at Arkansas. He dominated his final season there. Not only was he dominant, he gets drafted in the first round. He posted impressive NFL combine. Across the board, it's just check mark, check mark, check mark, check mark. I don't know what else you could ask for. Maybe he breaks out as a freshman instead of sophomore. No. Treylon Burks was a great prospect. He was my wide receiver 3 going into the NFL draft in our prospect model. And now he's going to be my wide receiver 2 over Garrett Wilson because the situation in New York, in my opinion, is just so damn gross. But the situation in Tennessee is going to be completely fine because we're going through and looking at Robert Woods, who's another year older. Robert Woods coming off an injury, ending his season. And I'm fine with Robert Woods in redraft, but this is a player that's going to be 31 at the end of the season. Like, you don't need to worry about the long-term value that you'll have with Robert Woods here. So next season, Treylon Burks is going to be the unquestioned alpha wide receiver 1 in Tennessee. You can see the elite level value jump. And if we're going to go through and look at his redraft value, and we're going to compare this to where he's currently going in Dynasty leagues, it's very similar, very, very similar to what we're looking at with Jerry Jeudy. Like, on Underdog, right now, Treylon Burks, wide receiver 43. If I'm looking at my Dynasty rankings to compare where we have Treylon Burks to a Keep Trade Cut, I currently have Treylon Burks as our wide receiver 16. He hasn't gone up. He hasn't gone down based on any of these training camp reports. I know he was officially listed with the second team. He was listed as a backup on the depth chart, but we've talked about this time and time again. What is the coaching staff supposed to say? Are they supposed to come out and tell the veterans that are already in the building, that have been in the building for a very long time, you know what? Thank you for your service. Thank you for what you've given to this team. But this new guy that just walked through the door, yeah, the 21-year-old kid, he's taking your job. You're getting kicked out of the building. No, of course you don't tell them that. That's the easiest way to lose team chemistry. That's also the easiest way to make sure that Treylon Burks isn't working hard. What you're supposed to do if you're that NFL head coach is you tell the entire locker room, every veteran there, oh yeah, no, Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, the guy that's been in the building for years now, the guy that's been working hard for us, yeah, he's the starter. Treylon Burks, this 21-year-old kid, he doesn't have anything guaranteed. He has to come in and work for it. And that's going to, A, incentivize Treylon Burks to come in and work for it. And B, hell, you're going to preserve that locker room chemistry. When Treylon Burks comes out to that practice field and he is clearly the significantly better wide receiver over Nick Westbrook-Ikine, the coaching staff and the entire team will know that Burks is the starter and it will be played out that way. Now, let's go over to our next wide receiver, another rookie. This is someone that I will admit, there should be a reason why he's falling in redraft, 100%. In redraft fantasy football, he should be a faller based on the injury, but from a dynasty perspective, I'm going to be drafting him. Let's look at Christian Watson. Now, here with Christian Watson, full transparency, I've drafted so much of this man this year. I have taken Christian Watson draft after draft after draft. Now that we have seen Christian Watson on Underdog, on those redraft formats, fall to wide receiver 62. He's being drafted outside the top 60 receivers. He's being drafted as a wide receiver 6. So full transparency, I have a ton of them. But the reason for this is we're looking at Christian Watson as another player that, in my opinion, had a prospect profile that checks a ton of boxes, that gives you, I don't want to say exactly what you want because he does have one red flag, but he gives you a ton of positives. You're looking at someone that came out and dominated for like 44% of the receiving yards on a per game basis his final season in school. Now, yes, he's at a small school, so of course you're going to need that production. But then he goes to the NFL Combine and freaking lights the world on fire. This is an elite level athlete. That doesn't necessarily translate to exactly what we were looking for from a dynasty fantasy football perspective at wide receiver. We know that you definitely want to be looking for the elite level athletes at the running back position. Wide receiver, you're going to have more important boxes to check. Like we need to see an early breakout. We need to see you declare early for the NFL draft. We need to see you be dominant your final season. And with Christian Watson, he did not declare early for the NFL draft. He does have that massive red flag on his profile. This is a wide receiver. It's a pretty damn old rookie. Like going back, Jeudy is 23 years old. Christian Watson is 23 as well. Like he's an old rookie, but we've talked about this all offseason. He is the one guy you can make the COVID excuse for. The one guy, because he had to play football in the spring. His junior season, he had to play spring football. The school was too small. They weren't Ohio State. They weren't Alabama. They can't just go through COVID and play in the fall and just have the blessing of the university they're at. No, they had to play in the spring. So that threw off the Christian Watson trajectory. I'm willing to overlook the red flag that you have of the late breakout of the old age coming into the NFL. It is what it is. That's why we're going to get a discount combined with the reports you're getting about Romeo Doubs coming out of camp. I know it's the cool thing now to say that Christian Watson's the second best rookie wide receiver in Green Bay. But if we take a step back and look at these profiles, Christian Watson's the guy you want to bet on. Hell, he was the player who goes inside the top 40 picks of the NFL draft. Now let's go over to a couple of veteran receivers that may not necessarily be as exciting as one of these rookies, but let's just look at someone that you've gotten top in production year in and year out for a very long time. Let's look at someone like Chris Godwin. Here with Chris Godwin, of course, the injury is the reason that people are heavily discounting him. This is a wide receiver that currently is not guaranteed to start week 1 this season. But what I really want to stress on is the fact that if you're drafting Chris Godwin, if you are trading for Chris Godwin in Dynasty, where are you doing that? You are doing that on contending rosters where you are the favorite to win this season. Like Chris Godwin is 26 years old. Sadly, the way Dynasty's played now, that's going to be an asset for a win now team. And if we're looking at the addition of a piece for a contender at the wide receiver position, such as Chris Godwin, are you adding this player for week 1? Are you adding this player for week 2? Are you adding this wide receiver for week 3, week 4? No. If you desperately need Chris Godwin to play in weeks 1, 2, 3, 4 in your Dynasty League, I'm sorry to tell you this, you're probably not a contender. If you can't get by with one of your wide receivers out, you're probably not set up. You don't have the well-balanced roster to be able to make a championship push. You're adding Chris Godwin on teams that are going to need him for the playoff stretch and maybe bye weeks. Like, you are really trying to add him to those contending teams where we know that he has the upside to be a top 10 wide receiver for weeks 15, 16, and 17 during those playoffs, or just during the bye weeks, you're going to need that wide receiver depth. And with Godwin, he has averaged that top 10 finish over the past 3 seasons. We already just went through and looked at the fact that he's only 26 years old. You're not trading for a Mike Evans. Like, Mike Evans drafted in 2014 versus Chris Godwin drafted in 2017. Yeah, with the addition of Julio Jones, maybe you don't love that for his value this year, but let's go right back to what we just said. Mike Evans drafted in 2014, Julio Jones well into his 30s. If we're projecting a year forward, Chris Godwin is the unquestioned alpha wide receiver 1 in Tampa. We don't know if Brady's there. We don't know exactly what the offense is going to look like, but I'm willing to buy in to Chris Godwin giving you top 10 wide receiver production down the stretch this season when you actually need it on a contending team. And if you're going to get the discount based on his injury, hell, I'm buying. Like, if I look at Chris Godwin in my rankings versus Keep Trade Cut, right now on Keep Trade Cut, Chris Godwin's the wide receiver 23. Personally, in my rankings, I have him as the wide receiver 19. Now, going to our last wide receiver on this list, he is going to be a little bit cheaper. I would say where I'm targeting this receiver is in your dynasty leagues where it's going to be a 12-team league where you have to start 4 or more wide receivers. If it's like a 10-team league where you have 2 wide receivers in a flex spot, hell, A, fix your format, and B, I'm not going to lie to you, this wide receiver depth piece isn't really going to get the job done. But if you're playing in a 12-team league where you have to start 3 wide receivers and you have at minimum 2 flex spots, this is someone that can dramatically help you out in a PPR format. Michael Gallup, someone that has seen his ranking plummet over there on Keep Trade Cut for the reason of him not being ready at the beginning of the season. But going right back to what we were just discussing with a Chris Godwin, hell, you should not be trading for a win now asset if you cannot get by without Chris Godwin for the first month, if you cannot get by without Michael Gallup for the first month. Like, Michael Gallup can easily miss the first month of the season. He can easily be placed on the PUP. But we've known this for a very long time. It's not been a secret that freaking Michael Gallup tore his ACL at the very end of the season after Chris Godwin did. It hasn't been a secret. And if we're going back and looking at his ADP on Keep Trade Cut as of March 23rd, he was the wide receiver 38. Now you're getting him as the wide receiver 51. So you're getting a massive discount for no apparent reason, because what did this team do? They let go of Amari. Not only did they let go of Amari Cooper, but they brought in 2 guys, one out of South Alabama, and then another James Washington, who he himself is hurt. This is such a thin wide receiver core. Gallup clearly has the talent in his 2nd season in the NFL. His 2nd season, he averaged more receiving yards per game and he averaged more targets per game than Amari Cooper. This is also a player that's not extremely young. He just signed that contract extension. Michael Gallup currently is 26 years old. So I think he's the perfect addition for a win now team in a format where wide receiver depth is going to be very important, specifically for those bye weeks, as well as that fantasy football playoff stretch where if you're a contending team, that's what you're looking to add for regardless. But thank you so much. I really hope y'all enjoyed this video. If y'all want more Dynasty content, make sure you go down there, drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel. And of course, if you want to draft with us, we're drafting every single day. Make sure you go sign up for Underdog Fantasy. Use promo code FLOCK when you sign up. They'll match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to $100. And you'll get our 2022 rankings, our 2022 fantasy football draft guide. But thank you guys. I appreciate you. I hope you have a great day. And I hope I get to see you with the video next time.